Hey, second graders. Hopefully you found my video. This art project we're going to start on is going to be something that some of you've already done, but I want to make sure all the second graders do this, and a lot of the times second graders like to hear this story again. So I'm going to be doing a drawing with you while I'm also telling you a story, and while I'm telling you the story, I'm going to be kind of drawing the different parts of the story, and I want you to follow along with me. So you're going to need a piece of paper and some other supplies that I'll talk about here in a minute. And if you don't have time to go through this whole thing at once, that's fine. It's going to take me a little while to get through the whole story and draw all the stuff. And then after we get done with this first lesson, we're going to be talking about another artist named Grant Wood, who did some really interesting paintings that are kind of like what we're going to be drawing for the story. So for this first part, you're going to need kind of a large piece of paper, as big as you can find, hopefully, and a pencil and maybe an eraser. That'll be about it. And then to add some color to it, I'll give you some different options about that later. So before you go on to the next step of this video, get a paper and a pencil, and then we'll get started. Okay, second graders. Like I said in the intro, some of you have heard this story before that I'm going to tell you, but it's a pretty fun story, and it's always good to hear it again and practice the drawing that we're going to do together. So I have kind of one of the bigger papers I could find in my house. It's not exactly the same size I use as when I'm at school, but it will do. So try to find a large paper. Just to give you an idea, let's see, a normal piece of paper, here's one that I've got, that's like from a printer, so this paper is a little bit smaller. So if you can, try to find a bigger one. So this story I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about a couple of the parts of the story. The first thing we're going to talk about is the setting of the story, and I'm going to just write the names of the parts of the story, like the setting and some of the characters and things like that, important stuff. So this story takes place in an area called the land of Scape. And you can just write this on the back of your paper just to kind of give you an idea, help you remember things. In the land of Scape, there were a bunch of people that lived there, but in the land of Scape, there was a couple unusual things. The first unusual thing is that in the land of Scape, there was this thing that everyone was scared of. They hated it. It made them really, really nervous. They didn't like to talk about it. And it was called Nazaro. And Nazaro, if you were to go to the land of Scape, you wouldn't hear this name very often because people didn't like to talk about this thing. But we're going to flip our paper over and we're going to draw the Nazaro real quick. So I flip my paper over, and up near the top, got a little line on here I'm going to erase. Up near the top of your paper, not in the middle, not at the bottom, up at the top, but I'd say probably between halfway between the top and the middle of your paper, we're going to draw a line that's going to go all the way across your paper, and it does not have to be perfectly straight or anything like that. That, believe it or not, is the Nazaro. It's actually a line that everyone was scared of, and we'll talk about why here in a little bit. So we got the land of Scape. That's where this takes place. An interesting part of the land of Scape is the Nazaro. We need to talk about the three main characters of this story now, and everyone in the land of Scape called these characters, when they were talking about them all together, they called them the Ground Brothers. The Ground Brothers, there were three of them. Their last name was Ground, so everyone called them the Ground Brothers. And we're going to talk about each one of them because each one of them is kind of interesting in their own way. The first Ground brother that we're going to talk about, his name And just be warned, they all have unusual names. His name was 4, and he was the youngest ground brother. And I want to tell you a little bit about him. And this video is going to be actually pretty short. We're going to talk about 4, the youngest brother, and we're actually going to draw his house and add some interesting things to our drawing. And then the next video that I put out, we'll talk about the other 2 brothers and start talking about the story a little bit more. So we have the Nazaro up here, and that's actually good to know because 4, the youngest ground brother, was interesting in a couple ways. One way was he was the most wealthy person in the whole land of Scape. No one had more money than him. He was very, very rich. And so he decided he was going to build a house. And when he decided he was going to build his house, he wanted it to be far away from the Nazaro, because people in the land of Scape didn't like the Nazaro. So we're going to draw 4's house down here in the corner of our paper. Now we're going to be drawing 3 houses, so we don't want it to take up the whole paper. And we don't want it to be all the way at the bottom, and we don't want it to be all the way at the edge. So to draw 4's house, I'm just going to start here and draw sort of like a squarish rectangle shape. Kind of like that. Again, it's not real close. It's not right beside the edge, and it's not right beside the bottom, but it's toward the bottom corner. People in the land of Scape said 4's house looked like it was 2 houses put together. So it actually looked kind of like 2 squares, and each one of those square-ish shapes had a triangular roof, kind of like that. Now, because you're in 2nd grade and you're getting a little bit older, we're going to make this house a little bit fancier because 4, remember, had a lot of money. So we're going to be adding a few details to this house. The first one is we're going to try to make it look 3-dimensional. To make this house look 3-dimensional, we're going to start down here at the bottom right corner, and we're going to draw a diagonal line this way. Now notice how long that line is. I'm going to draw another line exactly like it right up here, and it's going to be going in the same direction. So if you kind of put your pencil there and slide it up, that's kind of where your line is going to go, right there. And then those 2 lines we're going to connect with a straight line. Starting to look a little bit 3D, but we need to make the roof look 3D. So we're going to make a line just like the one we drew up here at the top of the roof. About the same length. And then we're going to connect those 2 lines. But this line that we're going to connect them with is going to be like the roof line, which is diagonal. Kind of like that. This poor little roof over here doesn't look 3D yet, so we're going to make another line like this one. And then we're going to make a line just like the first line of the roof, this diagonal. The only problem is it's going to run into the other roof, and as soon as it runs into the other roof, we're going to stop. So now we've got something like a house that looks a little bit 3-dimensional, so we can see the side of the roof and the side of the house. People in the land of Scape said 4's house looked like 2 houses put together because there were 2 sides to it, kind of, but also because it had 2 front doors. So we're going to add front door, front door. And if you want to, you can put a little doorknob on it. And if you want to get even fancier, you could add a little door frame. Some kids ask if they can add a doorbell. I guess you could if you wanted. I'm also going to add a little door window here and here. There we go. That looks pretty good. 4's house also had 2 chimneys. Now, a lot of times when kids draw these chimneys, they want to draw smoke coming out of them. But don't do that because our story takes place in the summertime, when it was a lot warmer, so 4 wouldn't have had smoke coming out of his chimneys. But he did have 2 of them, and they got used a lot in the wintertime. Okay, this poor house is missing some windows. 4's house needs lots of windows. In fact, I've actually heard that his house had at least 20 windows. So what I usually try to do is I start making some big windows down here at the bottom. And I usually add the window panes to them. And I try to add at least 8 to 10 windows to each side of the house. So there I've got 3 already. Some kids get really upset because they think it's going to take forever to draw these windows. It actually doesn't take nearly as long as you think once you get started. Draw a long curved window there. So now I've got 4 and 5, and then you're just going to keep adding windows. While we're adding these windows, I can tell you a little bit more about 4. He had a lot of money, beautiful house, and we're going to try to make this house look very, very fancy. Sometimes when kids are drawing these houses, they ask a couple questions about the house, like, Mr. Lane, can we put shingles on the roof? And my answer is absolutely. And sometimes they ask, Mr. Lane, is it all right if we add bricks to the chimneys? Absolutely. Sometimes they say, Mr. Lane, can I put a satellite dish on the roof? And I say, absolutely not. In the land of Scape, they did not have television. So they had to figure out other ways to use their time. One of those ways that 4 used his time is he liked to throw parties. He always invited people over to his house because he had a room in his house just for parties. Let's see how many windows I've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've already got 10 windows on this side. So if I put 10 over there, I would have 20. I could even add some on the side of the house. If you're going to add windows on the side of the house, the top and the bottom of the windows have to be going the same direction as the top and bottom of the wall of the house on that side. So they're a little bit tricky. They kind of look like a diamond shape. But if you want to add windows over there, you can. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. It makes it look like it's kind of angled like the rest of the wall. Like I said, if you want to add shingles to the roof, you can do that. I'm actually going to draw 2 different ways to draw shingles just for fun. So I'm drawing these lines that are going the same direction as the top and bottom of the roof. Remember, those were diagonal lines. And if you want, then you can add little lines that kind of go in every other spot. So they're not lined up like a checkerboard. Each row of lines is shifted over just a little bit to make them look like shingles. This is another one of those things that some kids think will take forever, but once you get in the rhythm of drawing it, it doesn't take nearly as long as you think. So I'm going to go through there. I'm going a little bit too fast maybe, but you guys get the idea. And you can also do rounded shingles, which I'll show you on the other roof. One of the reasons we're just working on 4's house today is because his house takes the longest to draw because it's a little bit fancier than some of the other ones. Now, the other way you can draw the shingles are to do these sort of what are called scallop shapes. They almost look like fish scales, but sometimes shingles are rounded like this. So you can do it like that if you would like. You can do both like I'm doing, or you can just pick one and do it on both sides. Kind of have fun with it. Don't worry about it being perfect, but you know, if you spend some time on it, you want to make it nice. All right, I'm going to try to finish this up. You'll notice that I skipped drawing the windows on this side, and that's really just to save time in the video. You should still be drawing some windows on this side of 4's house so that you'll at least get 20. I've got 12 right now, so I would only need 8 more. But there's a couple other things I want to tell you about 4's house before the video stops. Around 4's house, there were trees, and the first tree that he ever planted was this tree right at the corner of his house. And it was an apple tree. The reason it was an apple tree, and if you want to add little apples, you can. The reason it was an apple tree is because 4's favorite food was anything that had apples in it. So apple pie, apple sauce, apple butter, apple cake, apple turnovers, apple dumplings, apple. He loved apples. And after this tree started to grow, 4 realized that he actually really liked trees also. So he planted some taller types of trees like oaks and hickories and maple trees all around his house. And he especially put them behind his house. When people asked him why he put them behind his house, and his answer was always the same. He said, well, if I look out my back door, I don't want to see the Nazaro. So he kind of used it like a natural fence. So we got 4's house. Again, I still need to add some windows, need to add some chimney bricks, and then I'll be finished with 4's house. And then in our next video, we'll talk about the other 2 brothers, because today we've only talked about 4. Have fun with this drawing. Don't worry about coloring it yet. We're going to finish the rest of the drawing in the next video, so you don't have to worry about the color yet. Have fun, and see you next time.